I know the feeling. You spot a bargain sewing machine on a flash sale site. You think you've scored a deal. You get it home, and a week later the motor sputters or the presser foot won't stay aligned. Cheap alternatives often disappoint after purchase, leaving you with wasted time and a half-finished quilt. That's why I spent a few evenings actually setting up the Juki TL 2010Q, watching a few tutorials, and scrolling through the Amazon Q&A before I hit record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the hesitation most beginners feel with a high-speed machine is justified. Speed can be a double-edged sword. You could be stitching a straight line in seconds, or you could find yourself chasing a needle that's flying past the fabric. The TL 2010Q tries to balance that by putting a solid metal frame and a dedicated quilting arm on the table, which means you're not cramming a heavy industrial unit into a home studio. If you've ever tried to quilt a 12 by 12 blanket on a standard domestic machine, you know how much the extra arm helps with fabric feeding and stability. Who should actually consider this machine? If you regularly quilt large pieces, do garment construction that demands precise, straight stitches, or you're a hobbyist who's starting to outgrow the 600-stitch permanent ceiling of most home models, the TL 2010Q feels like a logical step up. It's also a decent fit for small shop owners who need a reliable workhorse without stepping into the commercial-grade price bracket. On the flip side, if your projects are limited to occasional button repairs, a few simple dresses, or you're just dabbling in embroidery, the extra speed and the larger footprint might be more than you need. In that case, a lighter, less expensive model would likely serve you better. Getting the machine out of the box is a process worth mentioning because the bonus pack is more than just extra needles. Inside you'll find a quilting ruler, a set of presser feet for different stitch types, and a sturdy dust cover that actually fits the unit's dimensions. When I pulled everything together, the metal frame snapped into place with a satisfying click, and the quilting arm unfolded without any need for additional tools. That ease of assembly saves you from the nightmare of hunting for extra bolts that some competitor machines hide in obscure corners of the packaging. The first real-world test was a 3x5 quilt block I was working on for a friend's birthday. I set the speed to about 850 stitches per minute, which feels fast, but not frantic. The feed dogs kept the layers moving evenly, and the needle didn't skip even when the cotton batting combination got a little thicker. What surprised me was the stitch consistency. The machine maintained a nearly identical tension across the whole block, which is something I've struggled with on lower-priced machines that need constant manual adjustment. In a practical sense, that means you can lay out a larger quilt without worrying about tension variations that show up as puckering later. Another scenario that highlights the machine's strengths is a simple garment alteration. I needed to hem a pair of jeans with a clean, invisible stitch. The TL 2010Q's built-in stitch length dial let me drop down to a 1.5mm stitch without hunting through menus, and the straight stitch function locked in place with a firm, audible click. The result was a seam that held up after several washes, and I didn't have to stop to rethread because the tension held steady. That level of precision is something you usually find in a dedicated industrial model, yet Juki keeps it within the price range of serious hobbyists. Now, let's talk about the hidden trade-offs. The machine's metal chassis, while great for durability, makes it a bit heavier than the average home model. Moving it from a spare room to a living room for a quick demo takes at least 2 people, so plan your workshop layout accordingly. The quilting arm, though incredibly useful, also adds height. If your ceiling is low or you work in a cramped space, you might need to adjust your work surface or risk bumping the arm. Another practical weakness is the learning curve around the high-speed controls. If you set the speed too high on a delicate fabric like chiffon, the feed can pull the material, creating puckers that are hard to undo. The machine does give you the tools to fine-tune speed and tension, but it expects you to spend a few minutes getting comfortable with those knobs. A frequent buyer question I've seen pop up in forums is whether the professional precision stitching claim actually translates into everyday use. In my experience, the needle up and down action is smooth enough that you can run a long seam without hearing the jitter that makes many hobbyists nervous. The needle bar moves in a straight line, not a wobble, which reduces needle breakage when you're working with heavy denim or layered quilts. That reliability shows up in the 4.6-star average rating on Amazon. People aren't just impressed by the headline numbers. They're grateful that the machine doesn't stall in the middle of a project.